Our next story is about Emmanuel Macron. The French president faces trouble from all sides. The war in Ukraine has hammered Europe. Macron's dreams of leading the continent lie in tatters. His grip on domestic power has weakened because of the poorly thought-out election that he conducted last year. And farmers are protesting all over France. Everywhere you look, there's chaos. You would think it couldn't get any worse. But somehow, Macron has managed to create even more trouble for himself. The French president did it again yesterday, another classic foot-in-the-mouth moment where he casually insulted a bunch of African nations. Take a look.
One part was our commitment to fighting terrorism since 2013. We were right. I think some have forgotten to say thank you, but that's okay. It'll come in time. I'm in a good position to know that ingratitude is a disease that cannot be transmitted to humans. But I say this for all the African governments who have not had the courage, in the eyes of their public opinion, to bear it. None of them would be in a sovereign country today if the French army had not been deployed in this region.
That was Macron giving a grand foreign policy speech, addressing a gathering of French ambassadors and chalking out the way ahead this year. Somehow, Macron thought that this was the right time to pick a new fight with people who already don't seem to like him very much, the people of Africa. You know that France has been on the back foot in Africa over the past few years. It had military bases all over the continent, mostly in its former colonies in West and Central Africa. French troops have been squatting there for decades, ostensibly to provide security cover. But on their watch, West Africa became a terror hotspot. Boko Haram, the Islamic State West Africa province, the Islamic State Sahel province, Al-Qaeda and its offshoots like the JNIM, all these terror groups have been running rampant in the Sahel region. In former French colonies like Mali, Burkina Faso and Niger, right under the noses of the French troops stationed there. This instability led to multiple military coups in West Africa, in Mali, Burkina Faso and Niger. And the military juntas promptly decided to switch partners. They kicked France out and chose to work with Russia instead. They believed that the Russians would be more effective against the terrorists. The decision had a knock-on effect. Anti-France sentiment started spreading to other countries hosting French troops like Chad, Senegal, and most recently the Ivory Coast. This is a massive failure for France, a moment of shame. But Macron does not see it that way. He says Paris is not on the back foot. Instead, he blames the African nations. Macron called them, and I'm quoting, ungrateful. And then he said, and let me quote again, none of them would be in a sovereign country today if the French army had not been deployed in this region. This is the French president, the leader of a former colonial power, talking about countries that won their independence from France. Macron says the French army is responsible for their sovereignty. How tone-deaf can you be? If anything, the African countries would have been sovereign sooner if not for the French army. Macron's mental gymnastics are truly world-class, but obviously the African nations were not impressed. Chad and Senegal have called him out. Chad's foreign minister issued a statement. He said Macron holds, and I'm quoting again, a contemptuous attitude towards Africa and Africans. He added that the French presence in Chad has often been limited to its own strategic interests without any real lasting impact for the development of the Chadian people. And then he reminded Macron about how Africans had helped France, especially during the two world wars. That was Chad's rebuke. Senegal's was even sharper. Prime Minister Ousmane Sonko put up this post on social media. He counters Macron's claims, saying that France helped destabilize countries like Libya, which contributed to the Sahel security crisis. And then Sonko issued a parting shot. Let me quote again. This is what he said. This is finally the place to remind President Macron that if African soldiers, sometimes forcibly mobilized, mistreated and ultimately betrayed, had not deployed during the Second World War to defend France, it would perhaps still be Germany today. During the Second World War, Germany had occupied parts of France. We know that the US, Britain and the Soviet Union helped liberate the country, but we often forget the role of African soldiers, conscripts from French colonies who fought to free France from the Nazis. It seems Macron had forgotten this too, but Sonko was happy to remind him. All this shows just how untethered Macron is from reality. Instead of acknowledging his failures, instead of respecting the wishes of the African people, he has chosen to insult them. It's another mess of his own making, one that will probably accelerate France's departure from Africa.
From breaking news to the day's biggest controversies, shedding light on the world's top headlines, detailed analysis on the stories that matter the most to you. Catch it all on Spotlight at 6 p.m. India time and 12:30 GMT, only on Firstpost.